Hello folks, Jason Crespin here at Grazing Acres Farms. Today I'd like to share an idea with you that I think is going to help speed up your daily moves if you do any kind of rotational, intensive, mob grazing, things of that sort where you're moving the cattle daily. Myself, and probably a lot of you included, probably use your ATV or UTV as your livestock moving mobile. Personally, I find it a major pain in the butt to pull up to the poly wire every day, have to reach way out there, grab the poly wire, lift it, or use a poly stake to reach out and lift it just so I can drive under it. In most of the cases, I've shut the fence off already, so I don't have to worry about it if I have to grab it with my hand. The problem is when you do this day after day after day, it gets old. You start to think of all the time you've wasted slowing down for that poly wire just so you can reach up and grab it, lift it, and go under. And in a lot of cases here on our farm, it's not just the one that I go under daily. I might have 4 paddocks set up, and I've got to go through 3 of those poly wires to get to the 4th paddock where the cows are. It's very, very time consuming, and when you're adding your minutes up every day, try to see where they went, I feel a lot of them's gone to this poly wire, slowing me down. So over the winter, I was watching some grazing videos, and I seen a grazer out in Australia. Can't think of his name right this second. I'll leave that at the bottom. And I was watching him set up his paddocks for his cattle, and then I watched him leave the paddocks and right over top the poly wire. Didn't even slow down. I was like, how the heck did he do that? So I watched it like 700 times. I like took it into slow motion, watched it, and I started to notice this thing he had rigged up on the front of his ATV. So I got out my pen and my paper and I started to play around. You know, I drew the side profile of my ATV and started drawing some things on the front of it that might help with this, and I figured it out. Today I'm going to share it with you. My setup isn't going to work for everybody, so you're going to need a little bit of ingenuity of your own to make this setup work. But I think you'll find it very, very handy. So let's go over to the ATV. I'll show you what I've done. Okay, what you're looking at here is a rigid PVC conduit. It's 3/4 inch in diameter. It's very flexible. As you can see, I was able to bend it without it breaking. And it's actually pretty stout on here. The cows rub on it all the time. Hasn't been a problem. So what happens is the poly wire comes across, hits the front of this plastic bar. There's nothing up here but a smooth surface, so as you continue forward with the ATV, the poly wire is forced downwards, where the tires grab it as you're going forward, which pushes it down underneath the tires. Okay, now if you have any kind of apparatus on the bottom of your ATV, maybe a snow blade plate, mounting plate, you'll have to remove that for this apparatus to work. You do not want anything protruding down that's going to grab the poly wire and snag it. You want your bottom of your ATV to be perfectly smooth. Personally, I have a couple bolts that stick down. So I've taken a piece of this same pipe, cut it to about 3.5 feet long. I slid it up underneath the ATV, gave it a nice little bow, and then I used a U-clamp to fasten it onto the ATV. Now what that does is as the poly wire gets underneath the ATV, that piece of pipe pushes it down away from my frame, so there's nothing under there to grab. The time it comes off of that piece of pipe in the back, the rear tires, the knobs on it are grabbing the poly wire, which force it back down to the ground and out behind your ATV. Pretty simple concept, really. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. I'll tell you, I'm very grateful for this. I can just fly right across the pasture now, and well, you don't want to fly, you know, you don't want to run over anybody. But I can continue right across the field at a moderate pace, plump, 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 across all the poly wires and go where I need to go. So my recommendations to you are, if you do any kind of mob grazing, rotational grazing, intensive grazing, take a few minutes, take a day. I mean, if you take one day to make this, the rest of your days from here on out, you're going to appreciate it. So take a few minutes, look at your ATV, try to figure out how you can implement something like this on the front of your ATV. I think you'll find it very, very handy. Okay, so let me give you a quick breakdown on how I did my setup. It just so happens that down here on the front of the Polaris, they have these holes right here where I stuck the pipe in. I stuck one end in this side, and then I put a screw through it so the pipe couldn't pull back out. I bent it up and around, made my loop, back down, and stuck this one in that side, sticking a screw in it. From there, what I did is I took a piece of poly wire and I tied it to my front rack until I got the desired bend that I wanted. After I got that, I added on these cross braces here that you see to give it some more strength because I knew that the cows would be rubbing on it. The one underneath that runs the length of the four-wheeler, as you can see, has got a U-clamp in it here. And then there just happened to be a hole in the back on the underplating. I stuck the end of the pipe up in that hole and give it a nice bend. You can see how it's arched, and that keeps the poly wire from grabbing anything on the bottom of my ATV. Now, as you can see, the weeds and grasses of different sorts do grab a hold of it, but that hasn't been a problem. The only real issue I've had out of all of this is my metal roofing screws don't seem to be ideal for this. They do keep pulling out. So what I'm going to have to do is probably through bolt this and put a nut on the other side. But that's not a big deal. The one thing I do want to make sure that I point out is that up here on the face where the poly wire rubs, you want to make sure that your support braces do not stick out any further than that. If they're sticking out the slightest, the poly wire will come down as it's supposed to when you're going over it, and it's going to grab. So you want to make sure you've got a nice smooth surface up here where the poly wire grabs. And if you've got a winch, you want to make sure that your hook isn't sticking out to where the poly wire is going to grab it. I had that happen a couple times. But for the most part, that's it, folks. So if you like the video, folks, so I hope you find this video helpful, and if so, you'll throw me a big thumbs up. That'll help boost it in the YouTube search ranks and make it easier for other grazers to find. If you haven't taken time to subscribe, please do so, and make sure you click on that little bell so that you get notified when I release new videos. Thanks for watching Grazing Acres Farms.